The three strikes law is out. The new Minister of Justice, Andrew Little, argues that it has not successfully reduced serious crime or acted as a deterrent, and so by the middle of next year it will be struck off the statute books. And to discuss this, we're joined by Jarrod Gilbert, sociologist who studies gangs, and Ruth Money, who's an advocate for victims. Good morning to you both.
Morning, guy.
If I could start with you, Ruth, what's your reaction to this? I imagine you're quite disappointed that the new government is taking this tack.
Yeah, look, I think it's really underhanded, to be honest. It wasn't discussed as any kind of the lead up to the election. But that aside, I have a real concern around public safety and victim rights.
What can you point to in your advocacy for this law that it has actually been working and has been a deterrent?
Well, my understanding is that the law was never introduced as a deterrent. That was kind of a byproduct. The law was introduced to incarcerate serious, violent, recidivist offenders. So it's all about stopping that really high level of crime by incarcerating those offenders who cannot stop and giving them a chance and the system a chance to rehabilitate them while the public are protected because they are away.
Yeah, but surely it is a deterrent. That's it's what it's supposed to be, isn't it? That's why you have three strikes, because at some point in that process you read the Riot Act by the judge and told that if you commit a certain significance of offending, then you will be locked up for a very long time.
Yeah, without a doubt, there is a deterrent part to it, but my understanding of when it was introduced was that it was more about the incarceration and protection of public and protection of, stopping, preventing more victims being created, because these people are very high-level recidivist offenders. This is the top 40 offences in New Zealand.
Yep.
It's not just low-level crime.
And what evidence is there that it is working?
Well, if you look at the numbers now, we've got 8,000-ish people on a first strike, and probably half of them at least are in the community, given the Sentencing Act at the moment, home detention or community services. Then we have only 200 on a second strike and only 2 on a third strike. So if you look at the way those numbers progress, that would suggest that there has been a deterrent effect. And a number of those people on that first strike certainly aren't reoffending. So,
okay, well, let's go to Jarrod Gilbert for a response to that. What is your response, Jarrod?
Look, the three strikes legislation is deterrent legislation. There's no question about that, and certainly that was used as an argument when it was introduced in New Zealand. And the data simply cannot tell us if that's working or not. The international evidence also is equivocal on this. But even if we accept there's a minor deterrent role to play here, the problem that the three strikes has, and they're significant, is the fact that it runs against some significant principles of Western democratic justice, and that is this idea of proportionality, that we punish people only proportionate to the offence that they have committed. And as part of that is another important principle of judicial discretion, that judges can look at a case, judge each case on its merits, and punish it appropriately. And what three strikes does, it removes that judicial discretion, and therefore we get disproportionate sentencing. So the first three strikes offence that goes through in New Zealand is a guy who's in prison and he pinches the bottom of grabs the bottom of a prison guard and is sentenced to 7 years in prison. Now, even Justice Tugald, who oversaw that case, saw that as grossly disproportionate, but his hands were tied. He simply had to give 7-year sentence. Well, I don't think anybody is going to argue, as Ruth just has, that these are the worst of the worst offenders, because the only example
Why was he in prison beforehand?
Is a
well, that's a good question, and that's a good question. As Ruth asked, why was he in prison?
Obviously, the guy had form. I think there was a reasonably serious violent offence preceding that, but he was, of course, serving a sentence for that. He was being punished for that. The offence for which he gained 7 years was, without question, pinching a bottom. Well, is that the best use of resources in New Zealand?
Well, Ruth, is it?
For 7 years for that.
Well,
Yeah,
Ruth,
because does that not show that offender is out of control? If you are pinching a female prison guard's bottom while you're incarcerated for a violent or sexual offence, that signals that you are out of control when you cannot control your behaviour, and that is antisocial behaviour that the public want protection from, and we do not want to create any more victims.
probably not 7 years, though, is it? And so, is it 7 years?
And yeah, to pick up on that point that Jarrod says quite rightly in terms of that takes away the judge's discretion, that's actually incorrect, in that the judges do have a discretion. They can apply the manifestly unjust law and have done so. So that shows that this law is working. Judges often invoke a manifestly unjust clause, which was written into this law to be able to care for an offender and ensure that they are getting a fair sentence. And
the fact of the matter is, though, that that provision, a very sensible provision, I admit, is constantly in use for the reason that the law itself is manifestly unjust. In that sense, it begins to eat itself because it creates such significant distortions. Judges just ignore it and go straight for manifestly unjust. It does show a fundamental problem with the law.
Yeah, back to you, Ruth.
Why don't we look at how it technically works rather than throwing the baby out with the bathwater? So rather than having murderous and sexual predators on our street, let's look at the incarceration and the protection of the victims.
Okay, can we just stop there? Because this is exactly how we got into this problem, really, in the first place. Because no one's arguing here to put murderers and sex offenders on the street. We've got legislation on the books in New Zealand to punish people and punish people severely. To bring up this sort of rhetoric that this is somehow going to lead to a massive crime influx is an utter nonsense. Now, this legislation came in from America. If we are looking to America, a place absolutely riven with criminal justice issues, an imprisonment rate the highest anywhere in the world, and looking for solutions there, we're looking in the wrong place.
You know as well as I do, Jarrod, that our law here is very different to the American three strikes law. And I guess my point is that there are a lot more things wrong with the justice system right now than tweaking a law that, looking at the numbers, is keeping these violent offenders under control. Absolutely, let's look at the administration of it in a courtroom with plea bargaining and manifestly unjust. But there are certain things that I believe there should be higher priorities being worked on, like rehabilitation programs that actually work, like making the court system.
We would agree on that.
Oh, we got some agreement on that. Let's quit while we're ahead. It's good discussion, though. It's good to get some agreement on there. I appreciate both of your time, the two different perspectives, so it's a good debate, that one. Thank you so much for it. Ruth Money there and Jarrod Gilbert.